Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. As part of Miami University Alumni Association's virtual winter college webinar series, today we present Exploring the Digital Horizon of Miami's History. Joining us for today's webinar is Alia Levar Wegner, the Digital Collections Librarian at the Walter Havighurst Special Collections and University Archives. Welcome to you, Alia, and to all of you viewers at home. Thank you all for being here. As a reminder for our live viewers, you can submit a question during the webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button underneath your video. And since we have several hundred years of ground to cover today, I'm going to kick it right on over to you, Alia. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Molly said, my name is Alia Levar Wegner, and I'm the Digital Collections Librarian at Miami University. I just want to thank Miami University Alumni Association and Molly Young for inviting me to speak with you today about our digital collections. We're going to talk about some interesting digital projects. So I encourage you to ask those questions that Molly mentioned, or share thoughts or feedback as well, so we can have a great conversation today. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that Miami University is located on within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who, along with other indigenous groups, ceded these lands to the United States in the first Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The Miami people, whose name our university carries, were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846. In 1972, a relationship between Miami University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at Miami University in 2001. The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami Tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of the Miami culture and language, and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people. Miami University and the Miami Tribe are proud of this work and of the more than 140 Miami students who have attended Miami since 1991 through the Miami Heritage Award Program. So we're gonna, as Molly mentioned, be covering a lot of ground today, which you'd expect from nothing less from a presentation that promises a digital horizon. So just want to give you a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. We'll kick off our discussion with an introduction to our digital collections. We'll talk through some of our current projects, so you know what's on our horizon. And then we're going to pivot to some of the creative ways that we've used our digital collections to encourage new forms of interacting with our archival materials. And so that way you can see that digital collections in action part, where our materials are being used for storytelling, exploring, and even world building. So what are digital collections? Basically, they are special collections materials, in our case, that we have digitized and made available online. This usually involves taking a high-resolution image of our rare materials and our unique holdings and creating what we call metadata about these items. And that's a word you're going to hear come up again and again. It's something I love. It's something I hope that you find useful. Metadata includes information about a digital object. It could be the title, the author, subjects. And this makes it so that you can find it online and find it in conversation with other materials. So we do digitization so that we can preserve our rare materials for the future, but we also want to make them available for research and scholarship and personal exploration as well. So although Miami University has been digitizing special collections materials since 1999, only a small portion of our Walter Havighurst Special Collections and our University Archives materials is available online, and that is less than 1%. So we've come a long way, but we only have a fraction of our materials online. So there's a lot that goes into thinking about what do we prioritize, what do we put forward. Feedback from you and our users and our researchers helps us decide. Currently, we have 51 collections, and that's totaling over 180,000 digital files for you to explore. And we're constantly uploading new materials, and you'll hear about some of those projects right now. We've worked hard to create these collections that alumni, students, and researchers want to use, and we have had great success getting these things out there into classrooms, getting more people using them. So, for example, from April 2018 to April 2023, our monthly page views have increased by 359%, which is very exciting. So we're up to around we're averaging around 47,000 monthly page views, which is great. And our collections are continuing and growing, and we're continuing to get them used and out there and sharing them. So where do you find these digital collections? You can find them on our library homepage, which is www.lib.miamioh.edu. And this hopefully is a familiar page for you. I hope you come to and use our libraries. What you'll see up on the corner there is kind of in red font now. It says Digital Collections right above the search bar on the far right. So that tells you, if you click on that, you've activated it, you can use that search bar now to enter the keyword of your choice, to explore materials, whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're interested in, you could start there. And, but if you want something more kind of holistic, to get a bird's eye view of the types of materials you have, right under that search bar, you'll see a Browse All Collections link. So you can click on that to see more thematic list of our collections. So, and that was going to take you to this page, which is our browsing page. It's a great way to get familiar with our materials. And so I encourage you to kind of explore these lists and click through and see what's interesting, what interests you as well. Some of these, as you're exploring, you're going to notice that some of these digital collections may be familiar to you. You may have heard them in other contexts. So, for example, we have our Freedom Summer Archives. We actually have 2 digital collections for Freedom Summer Archives, one for print materials and one for audio and visual. We also have our digitized Shakespeare folios and the digitized Miami Student Newspaper, which is a really popular one. But then there could be some digital collections that are a bit more surprising. One of my personal favorites that was created by my predecessor, Marcus Ladd, he digitized our copy of the Argonan Mariam, which is a 16th century Ethiopian prayer book that Miami has here. And it's very special because it's one of the earliest copies of this manuscript in the world. But we also have digital collections covering other history and institutions that make up this regional history, such as the history of Western College for Women. We have collections about early Miami University history, as well as the Oxford College for Women too. So every year we're constantly creating new collections and forming collaborations across campus and with other institutions to improve access to our rare collections here at Miami University. I'll say it's just me, so we like to stay active right now, but I do this with consultation with our faculty. We have incredible student assistants, and I'll talk to you a bit more about one example. And then so it's something that we do as a team. But I wanted to touch on some of our current projects so that you may be hearing about them shortly. So one of them includes a new Russian revolutionary pamphlet collection, and this is important because it's the first time we've digitized materials from our Desantra collection of Russian history, literature, and art, which is one of our signature research collections. And that has to do with the revolutionary period of Russian history. But then there's other collections that capture important contemporary history that help us understand current and global politics today, such as the Maidan protest photo archive, which includes thousands of photographs and videos taken by Dr. Emily Channel Justice. She was a former professor at Miami, and she took these images and these videos as part of her field work during the Euromaidan democratic protests in Ukraine in 2013 to 2014. So this marks the 10th year anniversary of that. And we can kind of see the wake of that with current events. But we also are uploading the personal archives of Dr. Carolyn Jefferson Jenkins. She's the first African-American president of the League of Women Voters, and she's a Western College alumna. So this project was generously funded by the Miami Women's Giving Circle. And as student-focused education is one of the qualities that distinguishes Miami University education, we also like to involve students in our digital projects whenever possible. So this semester, we partnered with Dr. Jasmine Sutton. She's an assistant professor of history. And we partnered with her and her Black Women in America class to digitize the Jenny Elder Sewell collection. So you might have heard the name Jenny Elder Sewell. I hope you have. This is Miami University recently created the Jenny Elder Sewell Distinguished Women of Color Award. And so we hope that this digital collection is going to continue to draw attention to Sewell's life in Oxford. She worked at Miami, as well as her work preserving 200 years of her family's African-American history. And I mentioned the importance of students on screen right now. That is a student who graduated in 2022, Megan Snyder. She's here, she's prepping digitization. But she is continued her passion for history and all things digital. She is now a digital digitization technician at the Library of Congress. So she's doing that, but in a different capacity now. So it's great to see. She worked with me for 3 years, so on some of the projects that you'll be hearing about. So now that you have a sense of what digital collections are, I'd like to pivot to what they can do when we see them as just the beginning of research and creative projects. So in the rest of today's presentation, I'll give you some examples of how digital collections can be sites of storytelling, exploring, and world building. We'll begin with storytelling, which is one of the most exciting uses of the archive. But the question we ask when we sit down to tell stories is, whose stories do we tell? And how do we tell them in respectful and authentic ways? So one example of storytelling is going to be the Lived Experiences Project. This is at its core, Lived Experiences Race at Miami University is a collaborative storytelling project that explores the history of race at Miami University through documentaries, oral histories, and archival stories of Black alumni, students, faculty, and staff. And it brings all these different types of stories together in a single website to support teaching and research. The pilot project for this was funded internally. It was funded by Miami by the Boley Creative Initiative, which is an internal grant program sponsored by the offices of the president and the provost here at Miami. And we're excited to say that we got funding for a second phase of this project that is in the works now. So Lived Experience is led by Jacqueline Johnson, the university archivist and one of my colleagues in the Walter Havighurst Special Collections and University Archives. As I mentioned, it's a collaborative project, but it involves people from other departments and participation from other centers on campus. And so there's a lot of people to thank for bringing this together and providing their expertise and knowledge, including University Advancement, the Humanities Center, the Departments of Educational Leadership, Departments of History, Departments of Psychology, and Media Journalism and Film, as well as members of the Oxford community. And we also had additional funding by the Humanities Center and the Greater Oxford Community Foundation. So given the importance of lived experiences of Black alumni, faculty, and students, we knew that we needed a website that combined these different ways of storytelling in an accessible and educational way. Our website, LivedMU, here on the screen, you can check it out now, is our first attempt to kind of meet that challenge. And we worked with our phenomenal web services team here at Miami University Libraries to create a website that centers diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to thank Ken Irwin, Jerry Yarnetsky, and Manning Q for the amazing work they did on this. When we talk about creating a website that centers DEI, what we're talking about is we're trying to ensure that people and community are centered, and we're centered in the design process, and that the language and the images selected for this project, they should mirror the way the languages, mirror the way the communities and people talk about or see themselves. And so in practice, what this looks like is when we go to the homepage, like you see here, our website opens up with bold images and call outs in the image carousel to some of the ways that you can interact with the website. So you can listen, you can learn, you can watch, you can engage. These are just some of the suggestions. When we move to our Story Finder page, this is going to be under the Stories bar. That's at the bottom. This is the heart of the website, where you can explore the different types of stories that were created for this project. And that includes the biographies, oral histories, as well as some of the more documentaries, as well as historical pieces. So we talked about metadata earlier. This is like information about each item. So that's metadata is also helps with this project as well. So on the right side, you can see all those purple highlighted topics. These are ways that you can browse and engage with the website. So these features let you sort by decade, race, ethnicity, themes, and gender. So if you want to do intersectional research, if you really want to study Black women at Miami in the 1950s, you can select there to pull up stories that relate to that if you want to learn more about have that level of specificity. So when you click on an image, so say an image really calls to you or a story and you want to learn more, you would click on the image or the name on the website, and it would bring you to a story page. And so each story page features biographical information, especially relevant to Miami University's history. So it's usually dates that they worked at the university, or if they were a student, an alumni when they graduated, and what their major was. So that biographical information, also we include linked themes and related stories, because we're talking about a community here, a network. And so we want to relate stories to each other and show where there's some overlap, where there's some shared experiences, where there's also some differing experiences, and why. And so, again, on the side, you can see different ways and themes that you can explore that are relating to Larry Young's story. And Larry Young, he was the director of Educational Opportunity Office at Miami University in the 1970s. He was a very important and beloved figure in the Black community. On the right-hand side, you can see where his story connects to Cynthia's oral history. And she was a student in the 1970s who benefited from Larry's kindness and mentorship. And she mentions him frequently in her oral history. So this is the way we can connect them. When we move down that page, and that's what we did here, you can see, you can watch a fantastic documentary short of Larry Young that was created by Dr. Andy Rice and his team of video production students. And this is weaving together oral histories and archival documents to show Larry's impact on Black students and faculty at Miami. Scrolling down that page even further, after the documentaries, we also included a curated selection of documents from our digital collections to give different perspectives and more context to people's lived experiences. And here we have, we pulled an article from, is a Miami student article from 1974, where Larry Young is talking frankly about the social isolation that Black students experience at Miami and what the university should do about that. And I call this story mapping. So, and we hope to do more of this over this phase 2 iteration. So we're bringing in on our previously digitized collections and putting it in context and connecting it to the lives and the biographies and the histories that we've created for this project to give a more kind of rich to nuanced experience for you. Those curated documents at the bottom of those story pages are just a fraction of the materials we digitized for the project. So if you want to explore more archival documents, you can do that here on the archives page of the Lived Experiences website. I hope this isn't an inviting portal that's gonna invite you to search that extensive material that makes up the new Race at Miami digital collection. And I'll talk a bit about what's in that collection in a few minutes. We've also searched, we're thinking about how you want to use the collection. So we tailored the search function here to search the most relevant digital collections relating to race at Miami. So that could include our more legacy African Americans at Miami University digital collection. This is an amazing collection of material that predated my time, the Miami Student, of course, and other collections as well, because we want to encourage people to explore these race-related digital collections through keyword searching based on the topics or the people you encounter on the website. This page also includes a curatorial statement by Dr. Helen Shoemaker. She's a teaching professor in the history department, and she puts this extensive collection in context. So she's telling you how it came together, what you're going to find there, and how to understand what you're seeing. So it's really great to have a historian kind of providing that context for us. So returning to that Race at Miami digital collection, one of the reasons is that a collection like this is so important is that the lived experiences were shaped by broader history of university policies and practices. Um, and this going back to the early 20th century here at Miami. And so these were practices and policies that many of the Black students and staff worked to change because they wanted to create a more just space here at Miami. And so making that history visible means digitizing a large amount of material in the university archives related to race. And so Dr. Helen Shoemaker, I mentioned her earlier, she spent a summer selecting material, going through our through our archives, um, and selecting materials specifically for this project that could help tell this story. And we're uploading those new batches. But by the end of the project, Miami University will have one of the most comprehensive digital collections on race at a predominantly white institution. So our digital collections are posted on Content DMs. Maybe it's just the name for our library's digital repository, and this is what the Race at Miami University digital collection looks like if you want to browse or search content through that end, through our general digital collections end, rather than lived experiences website. So to create this collection, we added rich metadata that include that because we wanted to record the documents, the name, its title, like if it's a letter, if it's a memo, we want to tell you what it is right away, as you can see here on the example. We also wanted to record the author, the subjects, correspondence, decades, and even themes. And these themes, they show up on the left-hand side as a way that you can browse, are very important access points for students and researchers because archives can be overwhelming. Even this digital collection can be overwhelming by the extent of what's here. And also people may be unfamiliar with university archives and say the historical importance of a memo from a dean or a white paper or correspondence. And so these themes kind of just let you approach this collection more broadly. So for example, we're growing these themes, but right now we have diversity initiatives and programs, race and employment, Black studies at Miami, racism, resistance, and protest, and other themes. And the themes are relevant to framing and helping understanding these and participating in these ongoing debates and discussions about race, diversity, and the future of higher education that we're having right now. So pivoting a little, beyond storytelling, we also have exploring. And because digital collections are, while they're excellent sources of storytelling, I like to lean in on that digital nature of the collections because it opens these items up to exploring our materials through data science methods and machine learning techniques. So I'll be discussing in this section an ongoing collaboration with the computer science department at Miami to help students develop research questions and real-world applications using our Bowden postcard digital collection. So, but before you can use special collections data in the classroom, you need quality data for your students to work with, which I mean robust, like a lot of metadata for your digitized materials. And we talked a bit about what that was, this title, who made it, what it's about, because recording that information makes it discoverable through keyword searching and browsing. But in large quantities, that same data can be explored to answer research questions at a scale that's impossible if you're working with just one postcard at a time. You need thousands to be able to aggregate and follow a research question sometimes. And so that's also what we're trying to do here. And so one of the things in my position that I think we need to think more about are how to think about our rare collections, our physical items differently. Think about them through a digital lens. And we need to plan ahead for data methods and data applications if we want our materials to be used in the future or in different ways. So when I took over the digitization program here at Miami University Libraries in 2018, I instituted a digitization for data platform, which sounds fancier, but what it meant that is that I was prioritizing building digital collections as data. So I thought about you, the user, as much as I thought about the machine and the software that you might use to kind of crunch these data. So you need to think about both when you prepare your collections. So in practice, it meant just in some ways doing what we were doing, but maybe just doing it a little bit better. So it meant creating high quality images. It meant creating item level description. And what I mean is that instead of describing 5 postcards, I made sure to describe each individual postcard, as well as creating like robust, good quality metadata that's useful for users of our collections like you, but it's also good for machine learning programs that need good, clean, consistent data. And because of these special needs for not all digital collections are good candidates for data research projects, but our Bowden postcard collection is an exception. So it was started in 2014 by my predecessor, Marcus Ladd. This digital collection comprises over 32,000 digitized postcards from a physical collection of over 600,000. We have 600,000 postcards in our collection. It's incredible. Housed in our Walter Havighurst Special Collections and University Archives. And these postcards date from 1895 to 2010. And they depict a wide range of American and global imagery and messages. As a research collection, the Bowden postcards offer students opportunities to study 20th century, especially 20th century social history and visual culture at that high level. It's a very metadata-rich collection because we record information about the location, of course, of the postcard, but also its printer, its publisher, the title, its subjects, who sent it, who received it, what the message was on the back, even the presence or absence of stamps. So and this is, now a 10-year project. So we have a lot of that data. It's good data. And so the large scale of that collection and its predominantly visual format means that we have to think about this collection differently if we're going to open it up to researchers and students. I call it a digital difference, but it's approach to reconsidering our physical materials in terms of their potential for data mining or data analysis, machine learning, or virtual reality, just anything that involves what the digital can do with it differently. So I often I ask myself, I ask my students, I ask faculty, what can we do differently with these materials in their digital form? And I think that's a fundamental question and a very creative question to ask. So and also it has the benefits that when we ask this question, it can encourage us to engage with disciplines outside traditional humanities and support researchers and students who want to apply digital methodologies to our rare books, to our history. And so for those, Miami is a very teaching-focused institution. That also means creating space for instructional opportunities with STEM fields so that we can bring STEM students into the special collections classroom. And one of the first steps, though, you need to identify collections that are good candidates for STEM outreach. So, because I mentioned not all digital collections are good options for that. So we collaborate with Dr. Philippe Giovanelli. He's an associate professor of computer science and software engineering and his machine learning students courses to use digital collections to explore research questions through machine learning techniques. And machine learning employs algorithms and statistical models to analyze and draw inferences from patterns and data. So it's looking for those patterns. And after looking at several of our digital collections, Dr. Giovanelli selected the Bowden Postcard Digital Collection as the most promising data set due to its scale and the robustness and consistency of its metadata. And so throughout the semester, when I work with the class of the semester, I meet with teams of students and they've already selected the postcard data set for their semester project. Like they see the potential here and they want to work with it, which is very exciting. So in one instance, one semester, the students used machine learning techniques they have to pursue individual research questions, and then they also have to select one to serve as their team project. So I got to see some examples of how the different interests students had individually in these collections. Um, in this instance, for example, one student conducted we call it a sentiment analysis of senders' messages to track the mood, the general mood over time. And what that means is postcards often have writing on the back as you would send them, hi mom, it's great at camp, miss you, love, So this student wanted to see, because we needed a large data set, if there was any change in emotion in these messages over the decades. Were people kinder, more romantic, more concise, So because with that large data set, it's hard to do when you just have 5 or 10. It doesn't make for, it's more anecdotal, but when you have thousands to go through, you can kind of make an educated research based on that. And so they were exploring mood and changes over time. Another student completed a subject analysis on the frequency of postcard subjects. We talked about subjects and metadata, and they wanted to see whether subjects changed based on time period or location. For example, an example of this might be when postcards feature things like nature, so lakes, ponds, woods. Are there more postcards featuring those nature subjects being produced during periods where environmental concerns are particularly important? The early conservation movement, or the 1970s more radical environmental movement. And so analyzing the subjects of the postcards can tell you a lot about the mood or visual culture and what people are valuing at that time. So another project a student did was what we call topic modeling, where they're analyzing the content of senders' messages to identify relationships between the topics discussed across the data set. So that's just a fancy way of saying that they're trying to analyze the messages on the postcard in relation to the image or other things. So for example, does a message have anything to do with the image of a church on the cover? So that connection between text and image is so important in visual culture, and this is one way to explore that. So as I hope that little description gave you, they brought such great research questions and to the project. But midway through the semester, we had to choose about which one was going to go forward. So there was a fourth, and the student, which was about color extraction, color identification in postcards. And so the students asked me to choose the most compelling one to move forward. I was their client, and in collaboration with Stephanie Hillis, the Arts and Humanities Librarian, we selected a color identification and extraction project so that the digital collection could eventually be browsed according to color. And by users with color blindness or visual impairments. And this also opens it up to art and design students who are trying to match and get match for color and graphic design. So for their final team project, the students refined their machine learning models to identify and match the 5 most dominant colors in a postcard. They matched it to those standard hex codes, HTML hex codes. And so you can see in the pie graph that those are the 5 dominant ones next to the postcard they were extracted from. You can see just how accurate they got. So here's on screen is an example of an extraction looks like. The students also went back over all the 32,000 data sets and enriched that data set and gave us color codes for all of them. And they created a test interface too. And so we hope to add this feature now to our digital collection so that anyone can sort by and search by color. And this is also, having the students participate and bring their expertise to the table and make our digital collections that much better for everyone else. So, while digitizing for data allows our collections to be explored through data and computer science applications, there are times and some certain materials and stories that call for more kind of creative or imaginative interactions, ways that and engagements. So emerging technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality can really open up these world-building possibilities with our collections. and take storytelling to the next level. So one of the more imaginative uses of world building I've been part of is this memorial project, which recreates two alumni's work. So John Maxey and Robert Diamant's design for the Hungarian National Memorial to Jewish Martyrs. It recreates this in VR as part of an interactive experience centered on their Holocaust testimonies, because they're Holocaust survivors. And this project is based on alumni archival sources on loan to the Walter Havighurst Special Collections and University Archives. I think virtual reality has an incredible applications in archives and special collections because it offers a way for students and researchers to engage with the process of memory making and practices of remembrance beyond what's traditionally possible in a physical exhibition, let's say, or even in an instruction session. The VR medium allows participants to use immersive storytelling to sift through sources and piece together experiences such as Robert Diamant and John Maxey. So a little bit about them. Before their paths crossed in architecture school after the war, and then they later converged in a very exciting way at Miami University. John Maxey and Robert Diamant shared many experiences during the war and during the Holocaust, but there were some key differences that shaped their personalities and shaped their careers. So they're both born in Budapest, Hungary, although they grew up in different Jewish districts and came from different socioeconomic classes. Robert Diamant was also 4 years older, and so he entered the forced Hungarian labor service in 1943 at the age of 21. And then John entered labor service a year later when they worked at the same labor battalion as his father, who later died on a forced death march to Mauthausen in April 1945. And the reason in Hungary that you had forced labor service was that at this time Jews couldn't go to college. So they were forced to work. When conditions in Hungary deteriorated as the Russian army advanced, both John and Robert were imprisoned in Mauthausen and later in Gunskirchenlager, which was a Mauthausen satellite camp, until their liberation in May of 1945. John Maxey estimates that over 30% of his family died in the Holocaust. And this VR memorial preserves some of the names of some of his family members. And although most of Robert Diamant's family survived, he had no knowledge of their survival when he arrived home to Budapest in July of 1945. And that's a story that participants can explore in that VR memorial. I'll show you a bit more about. So Robert Diamant and John Maxey, they finally met in 1946 as fellow architecture students at the famous Budapest University of Technology and Economics after the war, where they became close friends and frequent collaborators on architectural projects. In 1948, they received B'nai B'rith scholarships to complete their architecture degrees at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, graduating in Miami in 1949. They later became well-known architects in the United States. So while the memorial project touches on Robert's and John's Holocaust experiences, it's primarily centered around an architecture competition that Robert and John won in 1947 or 1948, the dates are a little uncertain, which was to build a national Hungarian memorial to Jewish martyrs. And this was the year before they came to Miami University. And so although their design won, and it was never built, and it only exists in these fragmentary testimonies and drawings made from memory. Some are here on screen. So a little bit about that. In 1947, that committee for the victims of Nazi persecution sponsored this architectural competition to build this memorial that was going to be sited in Kozma Street Cemetery, which is the largest Jewish cemetery in Budapest. Robert and John, they submitted a powerful memorial design that featured a pair of 150 feet tall arches and an inscribed memorial wall of victims. They won that competition, but the sponsoring committee was unable or unwilling to build their design. In 1948 or 1949, they built the second place design, and that's what's currently in the Kozma Street Cemetery, and it's used by Jewish community to host remembrance services to this day for Holocaust victims. But although Robert and John's memorial was never built, we can explore their designs through drawings made from memory. And this is where the archive comes in, because they are the core sources of this VR project. So collected here are the most important resources that we use to design the memorial, courtesy of the Diamant and Maxey families. And each of them posed a challenge for building a VR memorial. For example, Diamant's elevation drawings, you can see it on screen, was sketched from memory 50 years after the original design. And so it may say more about his memory of the design than the original. But there are also oral histories that offer helpful details, but they were recorded decades later. And then finally, the design itself was collaborative, both by Robert and John, and each remembers the design or aspects of the design in slightly different ways. So the ultimate goal of Memorial is to build a prototype that will provide narrative sketches and interactive experiences that will hopefully lead to a larger community-driven project. The final version that you see here, we tried to avoid saying a definitive statement about what this is or about their experiences. And I think that that virtuality offers that opportunity to explore this in a creative way and a respectful way. For example, I will talk about a little bit more about that memory making process, is that some of the ways that we incorporated testimonies and stories and presence of Robert and Diamant come up in unusual ways. For example, I call these memory marks. Even though Robert Diamant may no longer be here to interpret his experiences or his designs, the abstract figures he drew in the original drawings kind of capture that energetic movement of his hand across the paper. You can kind of see that. So they themselves are recorded memory acts of an architect drawing a design from memory. So in this particular example, our VR designer, Steve Geinup, incorporated those gestural figures from his Diamant's 1990 elevation drawing into the virtual reality space. And so the abstract figures tell us about, Robert Diamant in the 1990s Chicago when he was drawing this. And participants in the VR space can walk around these gestural figures in the memorial, and they're reminded that memory making is an active process and of creating and interpreting archival sources. So there's also a storytelling sketch that explores Robert Diamant's homecoming trip to Budapest after he was liberated from the Gunskircher lager in Austria. So after liberation, Robert contracted typhus and spent almost 2 months recovering at a hospital before he could return home. And once he recovered, he traveled to Budapest from Vienna via train in July 1945. And he walked from the train station to his family's pre-war apartment in the Jewish quarter, not knowing if anyone was alive or deported. And as he neared the apartment, he scanned those buildings for familiar signs. And he saw his grandmother's cane hanging from their balcony railing. He knew that they were alive, and he broke out into a run to greet them. And so there are many sources for this journey home, including documents, multiple oral testimonies, family retellings, and the archives. For Diamant's family, this Robert's trip home is one of the most deeply moving stories of his Holocaust experience. It's a powerful story of reunion and reconciliation that family members remember in slightly different ways. Additionally, Robert omits some historical details about his journey, so we don't know exactly what path he traveled from the Budapest train station home. We chose to represent those multiple paths that Robert Diamant could have walked from the Budapest Kaledi station. So, and in this homecoming sketch, you are walking through, and you can, as a participant, you can take different paths, and they're marked by different family narratives and Robert's own testimonies about that journey. So you can choose to walk a different route home, like he did. It also fills in some gaps in Robert's narrative, suggesting the presence of war wreckage he would have encountered. Because one of the important parts is we didn't want to privilege one family member's interpretation of Robert's homecoming over another, because we want to draw attention to the importance of Holocaust memories in survivor households and that transmission of that generational knowledge. So this follows the work of James E. Young, who suggests that we're approaching that point as the survivors are passing, of the inability to know the history of Holocaust experience outside the ways it's been passed down. So we wanted to recognize and honor that. Finally, we also had to understand that there's also community memory that we have to think about. So in many ways, Robert and John's design for the memorial to Jewish martyrs occupies a disjointed place in history. You know, it exists in and out of time. It was won, but was never built. We can see it here in virtual reality, but not if you go to the cemetery. So because that structure doesn't exist. So while it's historical fact that Diamant and Maxi submitted design and won the competition, it's also true that their design only appears in fragmentary sources in the archive, in this digital collection. So instead, featured here is that second place design that won, that became an active center for remembrance for Budapest Jews. And so where does this leave Robert and John's design and the memorial project? So by designing the VR memorial project as open-ended, we can make space for new forms of community engagement and memory work without undermining the importance of the current memorial to Jewish martyrs that you see here in and what it means to the Budapest Jewish community. And so virtual reality can help us do that. It's a vehicle for memory work that can help participants imagine future possibilities and alternative forms of storytelling and making space in history for what wasn't built but could have been. So I invite you to, there's a short filmed walkthrough of the memorial prototype. It's very simple. It's just a first attempt, but you can explore that and think about some of the possibilities that we can do with world building and archives. And there's a demo link there, and it's fairly short, 7 minutes. So I hope today's we have discussions giving you an introduction to digital collections and maybe some examples of what we can do with the digital collections in terms of storytelling and exploring and world building, sometimes in nuanced ways and imaginative ways. I just want to thank you again for your time. I'm looking forward to your Q&A, and I encourage you to ask questions either today as part of our discussion, or please feel free to email me anytime at wegnera3@miamioh.edu. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back to Molly.
Thank you so much, Alia. I know that was such a small little sampling of all that is available, but that's really impressive. I think it's really exciting. I do have a couple of questions, one of which I think we're all sort of like dying to know. This comes from Megan, and this might actually be like a multi-pronged, several layered answer for the question. But like, can you share with us some of the nuts and bolts of digitization? Like, are you doing it manually? Do you like farm it out? I don't know whether that be to like students or like other I don't know if there's like a digital archives outfit out there who offers some support. I know there's that image you shared that I think maybe it's you. You look like a maestro in front of a music stand or something. Like, I'm imagining just you in a room and a really good light and like, these real pieces of history and, share a little bit about that with us if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, because I did kind of skirt over the the labor. So what essentially, we got a grant, and they helped us build the kind of imaging lab of my dreams, which includes this kind of piece of equipment you see here. This is phase one. This is one of the best in the state, and it's the type of camera we need to do high resolution images to be as flexible as possible. And so it's fast. And we have a great software that makes my job easier. It can do some auto cropping. So what we do is we take photos, we do auto cropping, but then the thing that's the most expensive and challenging is actually the metadata, the information about each digital object we create. Most students work in spreadsheets. And this is pretty challenging. So it involves them working on it. I work with a lot of students. Usually, this is a light year, but I tend to work with like 8 and 12 students a year on projects. And we work on a lot of different projects. So right here on screen, for example, you have 4 projects that are ongoing right now, but there's 3 more, like I just didn't put up there. And we have digitization requests all the time. So meaning that people from different universities, patrons, alumni, they'll ask for something to be digitized, for their research, or, to make a photo book for their mom and an alum. And so we do about 6,000 images every year just for digitization requests, on top of the 32,000 images, say pages, we digitize every year here. So our lab is pretty busy, and students are an amazing part of it. The other part are kind of those collaborators you see on screen: the Havighurst Center for Russian and Post-Soviet Studies, Emily, Channel Justice, the students and faculty we work with. So I have what I call a hub model, kind of like a spoke of a wheel. Here I am. I actually had a slide. I took it out. I shouldn't have. But it shows you all the different places and people who are supplying research or expertise for these projects, all simultaneously. And so we're at the center of it, kind of connecting everything. So the Havighurst Center might loan a student or supply some funding that makes, and we'll get grants. So there's a lot of kind of give and take and sharing and collaboration that goes into making this happen, because a lot of people want these materials online. So that's kind of, but in any given day, we're working on 3 to 5 projects. We're just juggling between them, and they'll be at different stages.
A lot to keep in the air. So that leads me to my next question. How do you prioritize what and when gets digitized? I would imagine with not only the requests, but just, by virtue of existing and it being important to digitize these things, how do you pick what comes first versus what maybe waits a little bit?
Yes, that is an amazing question. And sometimes a lot of it has to do with, like, I'm listening to what people are telling me, like what our students, our alumni, our researchers are wanting. A lot of times we'll get requests for the same types of material, and I'll know that's a high priority collection. We have a digitization on demand kind of feature, so I'll digitize something for you, but it also lets me know, and I make a note of it, whether that's going to be a high priority collection. It's going to start to move up that list. Mm-hmm. The other thing is if people come to us, Dr. Jasmine Sutton, she's an expert in her area of antebellum experiences of Black women, especially in the Midwest. So she and Jacqueline Johnson were able to identify in all of our collections that this Jenny Elder Sewell was a really standout, incredible collection and needed assistance. So a lot of times we're getting input from experts and people who can recognize this value, and that involve their classes and into the process, because that's the other important part. We want them to be used, but we also want them to be learning experiences. And so same with the Maidan protest photos, something about contemporary moments, but I really try to center also diversity and equity, because historically our field over the 20 years hasn't been digitizing and materials related to Black or minorities experiences. And so that's another area. So I get feedback from lots of places that helps us come up with a plan about what to prioritize. The most important thing is securing funding. So if I can get a grant for it, I know I have money set aside that lets me focus on this project for 1 year or 2. And that also preserves that space. And a lot of that might be for like the Carolyn Jefferson Jenkins. It's great to have that time and focus earmarked to work with those materials so closely that were in demand. The Miami Women's Giving Circle voted for it. Yay.
Yes.
So there's a lot that goes into it, but that's why conversations like this, please tell me what you want. If there's a collection that you want to see up there, because we take it all into consideration.
Awesome. That's really good, helpful information. So I'm going to ask you my question. Is there some favorite anything that you have digitized? Like, you're just so pumped to tell people is there?
Well, I have an odd one. I love the Shields trade card collection. These are trade and advertisements from their little cards. They used to come in packages of soap in like the 1890s or the 1910s, and people, you would collect them all. They're just they're very colorful. This is when all of a sudden you had affordable color printing, so the world was just awash in color, and people would collect them and put them in albums. They would put advertisements in albums. That's so wild. And but they also tell a very in some ways heartbreaking story about what was important, what was in visual culture in America at the time. So we use that collection. I redigitized it because we needed higher resolution images to bring it into the classroom. So we use it in strategic communication classes that talk about race and ethics and advertising, because there's a lot of exploitation and topics and ethical questions that don't go away now. And by looking at this collection, you can kind of trace that history and see that these things are part of a long history. But then there's also just some wild images in there, as you see what people valued, what they were buying. And they're just gorgeous. So I like that collection a lot. We get a lot of use out of it now. And so I redigitized that one. If you're talking about priorities, I saw this potential here, and my second year, and I got the support to redigitize it and put it back out there for you. So
well, you successfully picked my interest. I'm going to go hunt this down, because this sounds sort of right down my alley of interest. Thank you for that. That's a good inside scoop. Okay, just a couple more before we have to wrap up. I want to go back all the way to the beginning. And Terry asked, because you shared the lived experiences bit, she asked, for perspective, can you tell us when Miami first accepted Black students?
Oh, I should know this, shouldn't I? I will have to get back to, because I don't want to give you a wrong date. And I think our university archivist, Jacqueline Johnson, is on here. So Terry, can I follow up with you? And so I can give you the correct information.
Excellent. Thank you. And Terry, maybe you can also tune in on Friday for our Charter Day webinar. I suspect that maybe Donna or Steve might also have the answer to that question if we can't get to you sooner. So just, shameless plug for Friday. Let's see. Tom asks, do you have all the recensios? And I'm almost confident that's a yes, but please elaborate.
Yes. We do have all the recensios in physical and digital copies. So all of our recensios are digitized at high resolution too, meaning that when you download them, those images, you could crop them, you can almost blow them up to poster. But there are Recensio digital collection. They're full text searchable too. So they're available online on our digital collections. I can try to put a kind of link in here. And it's one of our most popular collections, as you could imagine. So please explore that. There's just as you know, there's just so much history there. I'm going to put it in the chat box. There you go. That should be our Recensio digital collection.
I am going to share that really quickly. I'm going to throw that in a banner and put it across the screen. So there you go. There's the link to it. I know that's probably not easy to hurry up and copy down, but if anybody's interested, please feel free to reach out to me and I can send that along to you pretty quickly. And let's see. Oh, and Terry says, thank you for answering that question. And then we have one last question from Sean. And he asks about other VR projects in the pipeline. What's coming down the way?
That's a great question. So the one would be like a continuation of Memorial, because we did secure a little bit of funding to kind of enhance it, to do some patches. So we may see that. But yeah, that's the question. Our VR is our makerspace, and so it's in a little bit of a flux where we had a great VR designer who left, and so we're just working on that technology, getting that back up and seeing the potential there. But I think that one of the things I would love to use is that we have a toy theater collection, and one of the things you can do is you do 3D modeling and then bring that into the VR space. So So these are toy theaters from the 19th century, and then you could walk around them. Maybe you could do performances. I don't know. That's my kind of dream. So if you were to ask me, where would I put do some VR? I would want to explore that collection a bit, because right now these things are tiny models like this, right? But if you could walk around, walk through, be an actor on a stage, or just take over that space in a different way, I think that there's a lot of potential there for scaling up and exploring. So some of our materials. But that's what
Oh,
I'd like to.
that is a fun idea. That's a very fun idea. I could get behind something like that. Well, I think those are all the live questions we have coming in. Aaliyah, what a wonderful presentation today, and what a very cool resource to have here at our fingertips. Thank you, and to your team, and to your team of students for putting this together. This is super cool and super exciting. And I hope that our viewers will maybe try to take advantage of all the wonderful assets that are there. Just fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us. As a reminder to our viewers, a recording of this webinar will be available on our website later today. You can see this and all of our other Winter College webinar presentations later this week at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. And thank you all again for joining us today. Love and honor to everyone.
Yeah. Thank
Have a
you so
great
much.
afternoon.
Bye.